So I had a chance the other night to check out the Michael Jackson biopic, Michael, directed by Antoine Fuqua, starring Jafar Jackson, Miles Teller, Nia Long, Coleman Domingo, amongst other people. Basically the story of the King of Pop and how he rose to fame breaking away from the Jackson 5, going on his own way as a solo artist. I'm struggling to figure out where to begin with this one. A movie about Michael Jackson, the King of Pop, arguably the greatest musical entertainer that's ever lived. This is a really tall order to follow due to the massive influence that this guy has had on many people, even with all the controversy and allegations that have plagued his legacy to this day. Biopics, there's a lot of ways that something like this could go. You could do it in a way where it feels like you're just reading a Wikipedia description about somebody that was really famous, or you can focus on a certain area of that person's life and what they were dealing with at that time, or maybe you can do somewhat of both ways. And based on the trailer that I did a reaction to a few months ago, I kind of knew what movie I was getting into. The impression that I was getting that it was going to basically be a crowd pleaser type of movie with some really awesome musical numbers thrown into the mix. That's what I expected, and it's exactly what I got out of this. That doesn't mean I don't have any problems with this movie, but watching it for what it was, I was able to enjoy myself. We'll talk about that as we go on, but I'll try to be as realistic as I can here. I've seen plenty of reviews talking about what they liked and didn't like, and how the general consensus from what I've been able to gather is that it's very sanitized and surface level, not really going that deeper under the surface and showing us the humanity of Michael Jackson. As far as my own personal experience with Michael Jackson, I was aware of him at a very early age. I remember seeing the part of the Beat It music video when I was watching something on VHS. I don't remember exactly what it was. Seeing part of the Beat It music video was my first memory of Michael Jackson. And then when he did the music video or the song Will You Be There for the movie Free Willy, which is one of my favorite movies from my childhood, believe it or not. Although it took me many years to realize it was the same guy because of how different his skin looked between both of those instances that I noticed. I would more or less call myself a casual listener of Michael Jackson. I have some of his songs on my phone, from Thriller, Beat It, Billie Jean, Wanna Be Starting Something, Smooth Criminal, Dirty Diana, Will You Be There, and a few others. Basically the stuff that you usually hear on the radio. But I'd be lying if I said I didn't get into the music whenever it comes up. And I recognize that this guy has a huge influence and has inspired countless musical artists out there, from the likes of Beyonce, Usher, Celine Dion, Bruno Mars, and even Britney Spears. No, your eyes do not deceive you. I am actually wearing a Britney Spears shirt. I am very, very proud of this.
Okay, come on, give it to me. Give it to my face, come on.
Okay, just bear with me here. Britney Spears is actually one of my all-time favorites, believe it or not. Besides Madonna, Michael Jackson was a huge inspiration for Britney Spears. In fact, I think they're both kind of similar in various ways. They were both child stars, they were both pop artists, but in their own ways they were controlled by their fathers, and eventually they were able to break away, which unfortunately led to both of them going through some really rough patches throughout their lives. But at one point they actually performed on stage together with the one song that's called The Way You Make Me Feel. That's another one that I have on my phone. And just like Michael, she wore a fedora in the music video for Me Against the Music, which she collaborated with Madonna on. Don't mind that sound if you can hear it. That's my neighbor mowing her grass. The point I'm trying to make here is that Michael Jackson's influence has spread in all areas of life practically. There's a lot of movies that reference him, like Drew Barrymore doing the moonwalk in the Charlie's Angels movie that she did back in the day, or Michael J. Fox doing it in Back to the Future 3 before he launches that spittoon onto Buford Tannen. It's undeniable just how much of an impact Michael Jackson has made. And so to do a biopic about him, there's going to be a lot of expectations riding on this one. As for my own experience, I had a really good time with this one. This is basically a crowd pleaser that's going to entertain the hell out of the Michael Jackson fans. Unfortunately, the emotional depth that I was really craving and that we do see glimpses of throughout barely manages to get any full attention. That being said though, I did like the angle that they played on with Michael trying to break away from his father Joe. They show from the beginning of the movie that he's very different from his brothers, and he was always kind of going his own way. He always was very different from the others, and his father Joe was always trying to control him and keep him in line. But if there's one emotional story arc that I could pick up on, it's how Michael eventually finds the courage to break away from his dad. Parents unfortunately have a really strong influence over their kids. It'd be really easy on paper for someone like Michael Jackson to say, "Hey dad, move aside, this is my life." But for someone like Michael, who was always different right from the get-go, it's a lot easier said than done. And I guess I should probably put in the spoiler warning, my own fault. I'm still kind of tired from trying to get this review up. I had to go through at least 3 attempts to get this one right. But if you haven't seen this movie, I'll put in the spoiler warning for you, but I would imagine most of you have seen it by now. If not, I gave you the warning. He eventually does break away from his father while going on a reunion tour with his brothers, and for me it was actually quite cathartic. And a lot of that is due to the performances from Jafar Jackson and Coleman Domingo. Everybody has been saying this. Jafar Jackson disappears and literally becomes his uncle. It's actually scary. It didn't take too long for me to get here, but during the Motown 25 sequence, which my mouth was hanging wide open for a good part of that, at a certain point I thought, That's Michael Jackson. Safe to say that Jafar Jackson, with his acting debut, he started off with a bang. If he doesn't get any kind of work after this, I'll be really disappointed. For any actor that would play Michael Jackson, like I said about actually making a movie about him, that's a tall order to follow, and if you want to breathe life into the king of pop, you better bring your A game to the table. And he does exactly that and then some. And how they were able to recreate the musical sequences from the Beat It music video, the Motown 25 performance, the filming of the Thriller music video, the concert in Wembley where he starts the Bad Tour, it literally feels like I'm watching Michael Jackson brought back from the dead. And the energy that Antoine Fuqua injected into these sequences, this is the kind of thing that you have to experience in a movie theater. And no joke, while there wasn't a whole ton of people in the theater that I saw this in at my local Regal Cinemas theater, there were some people down below a few rows down that were getting into it. One actually stood up and was dancing during the Billie Jean number. In fact, like I said, during the Motown 25 sequence with my mouth hanging wide open, that's not something that happens to me often while watching a movie. I'll get to the criticisms in a minute, but you can't deny just how incredible these musical sequences are. If you're a fan of Michael Jackson and you want to see this stuff brought to life in a cinematic lens, well, this is going to be the movie for you. That being said, as far as the storytelling goes, everybody has talked about this. This is basically biopic 101. But I didn't expect anything else from this. Watching the trailer a few months ago, like I said earlier, I kind of knew what I was getting into. And for that reason, I was able to enjoy it. But unfortunately, it barely scratches the surface of giving us any insight on what was going on inside Michael Jackson's head and how he was able to grapple with being different from his family or with anybody else. They show us how kind of odd and eccentric he was. He was basically like a kid at heart, bringing all these animals into their house. When he brings the chimpanzee home, I thought, what the hell is that all about? That's kind of my own fault because I don't really know much about Michael Jackson's life story. I'm just saying that this movie was somewhat educational for me. As far as the other characters that pop up every now and then, Laura Harrier shows up as a music executive who recognizes Michael's talents. Miles Teller comes in as his eventual manager, shows up every once in a while to help him get through certain things or work out through certain deals. And Mike Myers actually shows up as a musical executive who's able to get the Thriller music video greenlit. Complete opposite of his character in Bohemian Rhapsody.
That's what you call ironic.
Then there's Coleman Domingo as Joe Jackson, Michael's father. This guy is freaking scary. Similar to the likes of Lawrence Fishburne as Ike Turner in What's Love Got to Do With It. Although not nearly as crazy as unhinged as Lawrence Fishburne is in that movie, the tension is on full display every time Joe Jackson is around. And there were some women a couple rows down from me in the theater I saw this in that made their disdain towards Joe Jackson explicitly clear. I did like seeing Nia Long as Michael's mother and how she was the source of encouragement for him. Unfortunately, with his brothers and his sister LaToya Jackson, they don't really get much attention, if at all. They're kind of just hanging out in the background, who will show up every once in a while. And Janet Jackson, who's the youngest child of the Jackson family, she's nowhere to be seen in here. Even though I knew that going in, I still found that kind of peculiar. But I also read an interview that she did with Variety and how she looked over the script or the first draft and said, no, this is too sanitized. I don't want any part of this. But she still showed support for her nephew anyway. So I guess that does count for something. But I was kind of thinking every now and then, well, come on, like, you couldn't fit Janet at least once, even if it was just a background appearance of some kind? It's not a deal breaker for me, but I just found that kind of odd, because she's just as, if not more famous than her brother is. Ask my Aunt Alex, or Kelly, or Aunt Adie. They're big fans of Janet Jackson, and they will tell you everything you need to know. And that's really the big problem for me with this movie. It barely scratches the surface in giving us any sort of insight on what's going on inside Michael Jackson's head, or anybody with his family, his manager, or his bodyguard, who's kind of the quiet father figure that he needs to protect him. We do get some moments of emotional weight, but it doesn't really go anywhere with it. It almost kind of breezes through and jumps a lot as far as the time stuff goes, covering a 22-year period from 1966 to 1988. There's one part of the movie where we actually get to see his hair getting caught fire, which I guess is an actual thing that happened. If there's any Michael Jackson fans that are watching, you could tell me whether or not that's true. I did hear that it was true, but I had no idea about this. That, I think, was the prime opportunity for us to get an insight of what's going on inside of his head. We see Joe Jackson kind of guilt him into going back with his brothers, which unfortunately leads to him getting caught on fire. And one of the first things he asks the doctor, is he ever going to be able to perform again, instead of saying, hey, is he going to be okay? In fact, Nia Long says to him, your son is in critical condition. And that's the question you're asking? Even then, the movie doesn't really have any interest of exploring what's going on with him there. Even though I did like seeing him announce that he was going to go solo and breaking away from his father for good, the film jumps from 1984 to 1988, when he performs at Wembley during the Bad Tour. That sequence alone, again, just like the Motown 25 performance, I actually thought I was watching Michael brought back from the dead. Whether or not Jafar was actually doing the singing or lip-syncing to a playback track, I could not give two shits. That stuff alone makes this movie worth checking out. But But then, as other people have said, this movie ends kind of abruptly, with a text saying the story continues, and then boom, credits. This is public knowledge, but they were going to acknowledge the first set of allegations that came up in the 90s, but due to some legalities, they couldn't, so they had to redo the third act entirely. On my end, anyway, it feels like it's only 2 acts, Act 1, Act 2, and maybe just a snippet of Act 3. And due to them cutting out the acknowledgement of the allegations, I can see how that might give some ammunition to people who are absolutely convinced that Michael did do something or actually was guilty of what he was accused of. And it's only going to feed more of the criticisms on how this movie feels too sanitized. I would not disagree with that, and I'm going to try not to go on a tangent here. The trailer basically told us what kind of movie we were getting, so what else were you expecting? Does that mean that we shouldn't demand that this movie be better than it was? No, of course not. I'm just saying that sometimes, at a certain point, you gotta leave your expectations at the door and watch something for what it is. I'm not saying that makes it right, but unfortunately, that's just the reality of the situation. In fact, this whole movie, since it ends with the performance at Wembley during the Bad Tour, Bohemian Rhapsody does something very similar. In fact, this movie kind of gave me a Bohemian Rhapsody feel. I know some of you are probably thinking, Joe, you gave Bohemian Rhapsody high praise. The narrative structures are basically the same, biopic 101. You have every right to call me out on that and feel that way if you want to, and I totally understand why you would feel that way. But here's the thing. Bohemian Rhapsody, I think, has an edge that this movie doesn't have. Even if it does go through a formulaic type of storytelling or biopic 101, there's certain moments throughout that movie where we're allowed to fixate on what the characters are experiencing in certain moments. Like when Freddie comes out to his then wife, Mary Austin, about his sexuality, or when he reveals to his bandmates his HIV diagnosis, or even when he breaks away from Paul Prenter, who he realizes finally just how much of a negative influence he's had on him. And it was all building towards the Live Aid performance in the finale, giving us some sort of clear narrative through line. This movie, on the other hand, is not afforded that luxury. I'm trying to be as reasonable and realistic as possible because while I did have a good time with this, objectively, this movie is a mixed bag for me. I know that what I'm saying is not new ground, but it did leave me wanting more, and not exactly in a good way. Had they not been constrained by the legalities of what they were going to address in the third act, I might have walked away going, okay, that was... whew. And I would imagine most people would probably have felt the same, which leads me into the possible sequel that's coming around. How this movie wraps up does give me that impression, and I would not be opposed to it. That's going to be an interesting discussion, and whether or not they actually do address the allegations that Michael had faced in the 1990s or even in the 2000s. I don't want to get too deep into that. I might actually discuss that in a later video, but depending on how much this movie makes at the box office, I would not be shocked if there's a part 2. And I've seen some comments say this: if this movie's called Michael, the next one should be called Jackson. Now that's what I call a perfect yin and yang. So the Michael Jackson biopic is not by any stretch a bad movie. It has some thoroughly entertaining musical numbers that are going to satisfy any Michael Jackson fan out there, well, on that front at least. But it leaves a lot to be desired as far as the storytelling, barely having any interest of exploring the humanity of Michael Jackson. But if anything, you get some awesome musical numbers in here with Jafar Jackson, who disappears and becomes his uncle. That is worth the price of admission alone. So that's all I have for you guys on Michael. Thank you all so much for watching. Let me know what your thoughts are down below on this movie if you've seen it. If you'd like to see more from me, just hit the like and subscribe button. And as always, I'll see you guys in the next one.